Hi, my name is Maureen Strickland. I'm the Social Enterprise Development Specialist here at the Social Enterprise and Entrepreneurship One Social Enterprise Partnership for the Northern Region. This webinar is on measuring your impact for the enterprise and the mission. We also have Zach Lowe here. He's the research assistant at Nordic Institute, and he is going to be moderating the questions. Everybody is on mute. If you do have a question, you can write it in the chat box, and Zach will make sure that your question gets asked either at some point during the webinar or definitely at the end. This webinar should take about 30 minutes. You'll also notice in the chat box, just in case I forget, that Zach has put the link for the evaluation for this webinar. So if you wouldn't mind at the end of the webinar going in and doing that evaluation form for us. So, as people have heard before, if you've been on any of these webinars this week, I do start by going through an overview of the Social Enterprise Northern Region Partnership. And I also reiterate what our definition of a social enterprise is, and then we will talk about measuring your impact. So the regional partnership is made up of one members as well as the project lead, which is Nordic Institute. Zach and I are with Nordic Institute as well as the rest of the team. We're affiliated with, Nordic Institute is a community economic development research institute at Algoma University, affiliated with the Community Economic and Social Development Program. We have a steering committee made up of representatives of the One Network. So for the Small Business Enterprise Centers, we have Timmins Small Business Enterprise Center as that representative. For the Innovation Centers, we have Northwest Innovation Center out of Thunder Bay. For the Campus Linked Accelerators, we have ULaunch here in Sault Ste. Marie, and we also have another not-for-profit that works with social enterprise as well as women entrepreneurs throughout Northern Ontario, which is Paro Centre for Women's Enterprise, the main office in Thunder Bay, but they operate throughout the region. This project itself is funded by the Ontario Ministry of Economic Development and Growth, with the goal of supporting the development of social enterprises and entrepreneurs throughout our region, giving service providers, particularly the One members, but also other service providers such as the CFDCs, economic development officers, etc., resources and tools to assist social entrepreneurs and social enterprises wishing to scale up. And our area for this project is all of Northern Ontario, stretching from Parry Sound to the Manitoba border, including the James Bay coast, and everything in between. So that's the summary of the partnership. And just reiterate our definition for this partnership. This has been agreed upon by all the One members involved. This is our definition for social enterprise. That social enterprises have a mission to address social, environmental, economic, or cultural challenges by reinvesting their profits above their operational expenses back into their mission, and they use a triple bottom line to measure their success. So what we're going to be talking about here today is actually ways of measuring that impact in a more concrete way. As we've talked about in previous webinars, social enterprise itself is not a business form. Social enterprises need to still register as a business form, such as a nonprofit, a cooperative, a sole proprietorship, a partnership, or a for-profit corporation. So, social impact. Social enterprises are formed by typically passionate people who really care about a need in their community they feel is not being met. It's typically a social need. It might be an environmental issue, cultural issue, an economic issue. This becomes their social mission, which they're building their enterprise on. And that is, the enterprise itself is selling a product or a service. So we've talked a lot about business feasibility, business planning in previous webinars. We've talked about the importance of governance, especially if you need a board. But you also really need to track your social impact. And this is for a number of reasons. It's good for your business. It's also good for potentially accessing capital. It's good to tell your story. So that is what we're going to discuss today. Some very kind of fairly basic tools to measure that impact that any social enterprise can use. And we recommend that you start doing this. You think about those indicators, they're part of your business plan before you open, and then you start tracking right away. And probably over time, your tracking will become more sophisticated, but it's important to start thinking about it at the same time you're looking at your business planning and all those early stages. So what are the other reasons you want to measure impact? You want to confirm to yourself that the reason that you started this enterprise to make an impact is actually working. You want to use that information to inform the decision-making around your business. If you're not tracking, you don't know that something might be up. But if you are tracking, it's another way besides financial information, etc., to know that maybe sales aren't where they should be. Maybe you're not selling into a certain market that you thought you would. So it's another way of maintaining and analyzing your business. It's a great way to tell your story. As you know, particularly young people, millennials, in fact, most people now are very concerned about things like where their food's coming from. They're concerned about climate change. There's a much greater knowledge and caring among people about what's going on in their community, community economic development, money staying in the community. So by tracking this impact, you can then use that information to tell a great story about how you're making a change, making a positive change, and that can be used as a marketing tool. It's another reason to measure impact. And the last one is there's social enterprise funds available, different funds all over the place. Depending on what your social enterprise is, it's going to depend on which ones you're eligible for. But often integral to accessing that funding is showing the funder or the lender that you are measuring your impact and you can present that information to them. So those are the 4 key reasons why you should measure your social impact. So how do we measure it? Okay, I'm going to go through it theoretically, and then we'll kind of talk about it from a business a social enterprise that I've kind of made up in my head. So first of all, you define your principal area of social impact. So this business that we're going to talk about, our hypothetical business, is a sole proprietor who wants to. So the social need that they see is that young kids, spending all their time on their devices, don't go outside, they're not active, not exposed to the outdoors. So they want to run a business where they're providing basically an outdoor gym to a group of, we'll say, anybody from the age of like 7 to 16. So that's their area of social impact. They want to get that age group more active, and they also want to expose them to the outdoors by doing these activities in sort of this outdoor gym idea. So then they need to select the objectives they want to achieve. So for them, the objectives could be a better appreciation for the outdoors, more time going in the outdoors, and increased levels of activity. Those could be their objectives. Then they want to define indicators for these objectives. So maybe a measure of greater activity is to find out how much time per week outside of the class that the customers, who are the adolescents, are going and being active on their own. Or maybe they want to know that there's indication of a greater interest in outdoor activities, the environment, that type of thing. So then you want to define the range for these indicators. So that would be something like, okay, the range that we want to meet is that consumer or customer A, who never went outside before, was always on their device, that we'd like to see them going outside, being active, anywhere from 1 hour to 4 hours a week. So they establish ranges for those indicators. And then they determine how they're going to collect the data for that. And I'll talk a bit more about that more thoroughly in a few minutes. and then they collect this data, they analyze it, and they share it. So those are very, very simple, a simple way to think through and figure out how you're going to measure this impact, to break it down for yourselves. And we do have a worksheet, you probably received it earlier, to kind of remind you of this webinar and how you can calculate these things. So again, why is this important? Because by doing that, by gathering this, it might be qualitative information, it might be quantitative information, but by gathering information on the social impact, you are showing to yourself and to others that the community need is being addressed. You're also using it as information for your business plan. And I would say that in this hypothetical example, let's say when the person does the analysis, they realize that they're only getting kids from 8 to 12. Or they realize that kids are being active, but they're not actually going into the outdoors the way they wanted. So then they can use this information as a way to come up with new marketing ideas around reaching out to the older demographic, the 12 to 16-year-olds, or figuring out ways to tweak their business plan to achieve their objectives. The other key thing that you need to remember around all of this is if you have a board and you are wanting to measure these social impacts, the board needs to be on side as well. You always have to keep the board involved. So it's one thing for, say, the manager, if let's say this was a not-for-profit organization instead of a sole proprietorship, it's one thing for the manager to believe that this is important, but the board needs to know about it too, and you could also get input from that board and input from the board on how you might measure things differently or ways you can achieve your impact better. So you see that the impact is tied up to all the layers of your social enterprise. And it's fundamental to your social mission, as we discussed. So it's that impact and measuring it is related to the long-term vitality and viability of your enterprise. Because if you're not achieving those objectives, because your business was firstly designed on achieving those objectives, that impact, if you're not achieving them, then it's very likely it's tied into business issues and your enterprise may fail. So it's not just, a linear thing. I'm just going to count these things and then I'll have this information. 10 people liked trees better. You're using that information for all sorts of reasons within your business. And you also use the information if you want to scale up. If you want to increase your impact, then you can make new objectives. Maybe you've determined that you've reached all the impact you can doing this one thing in this area, but now there's demand outside that. So then you use the same thing to see how you can grow your impact. So at this point, I'll see if there's any questions.
There's just a question about if the slideshow will be available.
Oh, good question. If the slideshow will be able to be available to print. The webinars will be online, and I imagine that we could upload the PowerPoints as well, definitely. We'll make a note of that. Thank you. Okay, so objectives to be achieved. So when you're thinking about these objectives, it's important that you make them achievable. So if you're a startup, you're just getting going with your enterprise, you've got lots of things on your plate. There's the business of doing business, as well as the finances, growing your business. Maybe you want, at that point, your social impact objectives not to be outside the realm of what your cash flow projection might have told you. So they need to be achievable and clearly defined. So for instance, another example might be, and a lot of social enterprises are built around employing people who are otherwise having issues with employability in the workplace. So one of a very common social impact objective is to employ people who need assistance in that realm, and they track it by defining that they would like to see 5 people employed in a year, and they help them increase their employability skills. So that's an easy thing to track, but it's defined. You can do it. And once you've agreed on what the objectives are and defined them, you just have to make sure everybody's on board. You need your management on board, your board on board, your staff, if it's a co-op, the membership, because then people are keeping that impact in mind as they're going about the day-to-day running of the business. It has to be measurable, so there needs to be a number attached to it. You can't have qualitative as qualitative information more for the telling of the story, but it's really good to have something you can also put a number to. So for instance, something like a business that's maybe involved in the local economy, and they've made a goal of trying to maximize how much of their supplies they procure from the local community. So they want to set a percentage on that. They want to say, I'm going to buy 50% of everything I sell locally. So that's something that's measurable. And you also, just like your cash flow projections, your business plan, your staffing issues, you're going to review this on a regular basis. So it becomes integral to your business the way all the other aspects of your business are monitored. Okay, so the indicators, as I said, they're related to the objective, and less is more. Like if you can have one objective, for instance, the outdoor gym, you want to have 10 kids who are active 3 more hours a week than they normally are. So that 3 more hours can be your indicator. It's very clear, it's measurable, and you can forecast it out. So less is more, simple is better, to help to clearly define the impact that you're making. And of course, social enterprises, the mission that they're designed on are wide and broad. There's thousands of different reasons why somebody starts a social enterprise. So I'm presenting you principles today that you can apply to your own enterprise, and the worksheet will help you sort that out yourself. I'm just using a few examples today. So the indicator range, again, it needs to be, it needs to make sense. It has to reflect your business and what is possible. You don't want to set a range that is not in line with the rest of your business. You'll never achieve it, right? So the goal is to set something that is probable and doable, something aspirational, but still doable. And then, because you're analyzing, if you're achieving this range, again, if you fall below that range, there's a problem somewhere. Maybe the indicator's wrong. There's something wrong with your business that you need to tweak. So by following these steps, making it simple, making it achievable, making it specific, then you're able to see where there might be a problem. And that's only going to benefit your business, which is going to benefit achieving your social mission. So how can you collect data? Well, there's all sorts of different ways. It might be simply just adding things up. So for the example of the people you're hiring, it's just a matter of, okay, they were hired here for 3 months. They achieved what we wanted them to do. It's just a matter of tallying things up. Let's say it's something a little bit more, less tangible. Let's say it's around the people that you've employed. You're wanting to see that their confidence has grown. They've increased skills in maybe communications and customer service. Maybe at that point, you design a questionnaire for your staff as they leave. You could do one when they start and one when they leave, and then you have some pre and post data that you can talk about. So it could be at the end of the year, we had 5 people. When they came in, they lacked confidence, had a hard time looking customers in the eye, but when they left, these are the things they self-reported and what we saw in terms of their strengths. You could also uncover some of that qualitative data through focus groups. So those are some of the ways you can collect this data. Obviously, the easiest one is in the math, basically adding things up, taking percentages. But you can also collect some of that more intangible data. Like in terms of, say, some businesses might be built on wanting to make a positive impact on the environment. Some of the things that we've seen in, say, the food and farm sector are an interest in reducing the kilometers in the supply chain of, so obviously, again, it's about purchasing things more locally. So they would, tally up the mileage on their car, for instance. So these are just some things to think about. Now, here's the worksheet. So as I said, very broad, all sorts of different topics. At the top of all of our worksheets, we do have a spot to write down your social mission to keep that top of mind. That's what your enterprise is based on. That's what you're measuring for your impact. And then we also have a spot for the actual social enterprise. That's the business of doing your business that's going to create that impact. So we always want to keep both of those there. They're happening in parallel. And then you can ask yourself the questions. What are the principal areas of impact being addressed? So you've started your enterprise based on your passion. It would probably fall into one of these 4 categories: social, cultural, economic, or environmental. And then based on that, what specific objectives are you trying to achieve? And again, be specific as possible, and then pull out the indicators for these objectives. So this is where you're then kind of bringing it down to something very tangible. And then you're going to look at your range that is kind of the minimum and maximum that you can do at this time. And just like your business plan, this measuring of social impacts and setting these goals is very much monitored and will change as your business grows, because obviously your maximum is going to get bigger as your business grows and you're able to do more. And then the second page, think about how you're going to measure this data and how you're going to use the data. And this is very key. So just to reiterate, the data can be used to adjust your business plan, your operations, your staffing, really link those indicators into how your business is being run. The data can be used to help with your marketing, can tell your story, get people excited about the impact you're making. The data can be used when you're asked to provide information on a social finance loan or funding application on, how you're going to measure the data. And if you're a few years into business, you can show them how you measured it and the impact you've had. It makes your case very strong. And it also can be used as a tool to figure out if it's time for you to scale up. Because if you're achieving the impact goals you've made, or you have like overreached them, it may show that it's time to grow, right? Or if you're not reaching those goals, it's probably not time to scale up. It's one of the many things that you need to look at, and we did talk about this in a previous webinar called about scaling up. So I hope that gives you a good kind of handle, a good framework to start thinking about how you could measure your own, your own impact with the social enterprises you have. So once you have the data, you're using it yourself to analyze, as we talked about, and you're also using it to share with others. So at this point, I'll see if there's any more questions, and then I'll, nope, Zach indicates there's no new questions. So I will just draw your attention to other resources that we do have. We have a webpage, www.seethechange.ca. It's a new webpage. It's slightly in a work in progress, but it is actually up and running as of today. And on that right now, you can find multiple resources about this project. And I will be doing a webinar just navigating people through the pages tomorrow at, I believe it's 1 o'clock. We also have a few more peer webinars this week. At 1 o'clock today, there is one that is going to just highlight a pilot project that is happening in Sault Ste. Marie between the Small Business Enterprise Center and the CFTC here, a peer lending circle. We have an asset mapping webinar tomorrow. as well as the web page navigation. And then the last webinar is on how you can form your own grassroots social enterprise support circle in your community. We also do live workshops with organizations. So if any of this you feel might be helpful to have in your community with an actual person, we can organize that. We have regional roundtables coming in Kenora at the end of January 2019, as well as in Timmins in the Northeast at the end of February. And we're looking for peer people who might be interested in being peer mentors for social entrepreneurs in Northern Ontario. So, as I said, Zach has the link for the SurveyMonkey in the chat bar. And if there are, oh, we have a question?
If you could just go over what the webinars and their times
Tomorrow? Okay. Tomorrow's webinars are community asset mapping at 12 noon. Navigating our online resources, so our webpage, at 1 o'clock. And the grassroots peer, social enterprise peer circles, forming those at 2 p.m. And I would think that all of those webinars should be about half an hour each. So you can also reach us at info@seethechange.ca. As well, all of these webinars are being recorded and will be uploaded onto our new webpage within the next 10 days. So if there are no more questions, oh, we have a question.
How many objectives do you think are workable? I find the whole process of drafting and defining a social enterprise overwhelming at times, so I'd appreciate an opinion.
Yeah, I would say that I think 4 is the maximum. And I say that based on what I see funders may be wanting or potential lenders. I think that most people understand that more than 4 is way too much to ask. And I also think it depends on your social enterprise. It could be that you have one clear objective and you only need 1. But if there are multiple things you're trying to achieve, I wouldn't actually go for more than 4. And I think if you did have strong data on 4, if you did need access to capital, that you'd be in a strong position to have the data at your fingertips. You would have analyzed how you're collecting it, and you may have started collecting some. And I think that would help with any grant or loan asks to potential funders. Any other questions? Okay, we'll give it a second. And at 1 o'clock, it's a very brief webinar. We're just explaining this pilot project that's very exciting here in Sault Ste. Marie that helps social entrepreneurs get business support as well as access to capital. So we might see some of you there.
Where would I access the recordings of these sessions?
They will be uploaded onto the webpage, www.seethechange.ca. And we're expecting that they will be on the webpage within 10 business days. And we also took note that we were going to update the or upload the actual, just the PowerPoints as well without the talking. Okay, if we're good, thank you very much for attending, and might see you later. Okay, bye.